Okay, it's time for a movie, and it's Boston Strangler, released in 1968, directed by Richard Fleischer, from a book by Frank Gerald and Edward Arnout. The music's by Lionel Newman. The cast: Tony Curtis in the lead role plays the Strangler, Albert DeSalvo. Henry Fonda plays John Bottomley. Sally Kellerman is Diane Cludy. George Kennedy plays Phil Donatiel, and there's a few other sundry actors. This, of course, is based on the true life story of one Albert DeSalvo, who confessed to the murder and rape of 13 women over an 18-month period in the early 60s in the United States. The film strays a little bit from the reality. The director prefers to depict the man as a sex fiend, as a basket case schizoid, someone more ill than evil. His terrible crime spree in reality, though, filled the tabloids, and he became a legendary figure in the world of serial killers. The film version reveals a one-time happy family man battling mental problems over a split personality and losing to the illness. This leads to some degree of sympathy from the audience. It's a bit tiresome, this reviewer says, but Curtis works very hard to give his character some force in one of his best performances. The film offers a second-hand look at what psychological reasons drove this killer, and lacks a proper tension to keep the pot boiling. It's good, though, at looking at how a Boston neighbourhood looked and felt in the midst of this crime wave in the 60s. Henry Fonda is fine as the Attorney General John Bottomley. He's wrapped up in this difficult case, earnestly trying to track the killer down as efficiently as he can, but he likes it, as often happens in police work, without luck there would be no arrest. What mostly filled the split screen was the many interruption scenes where on one side was the suspect and the interrogator in the present, and on the other side the suspect and his interrogator in flashbacks. Fleischer eschews the graphic violence in the murders and aims instead to try and understand the killer through the script's bogus psychology. Kellerman is cast as the Strangler's only surviving victim, and Hurt Hatfield as the gay pervert who becomes a suspect. The real life scenario played out with DeSalvo being stabbed to death in prison a decade after he was convicted in 1975, and mystery still clouds this story, as many law experts do not believe he was the killer, but his confession was the result of deluded mind. So there we have it. I think I saw this movie back in the early 70s with a very little recollection, so it's almost like watching a new movie. As mentioned earlier, the film operates probably too much, this split screen idea. But anyway, we open up with the first crime scene. It's not actually the first, it's the second, but the movie it's the first. The police arrive at this apartment to find this woman who's clearly dead, has been strangled, although that's not exactly established, but it is shortly later when the police seem to be trying to fob off the media with regard to what they consider to be the motive, and there's various sort of police talk about the profile, but they really have no idea. Then we meet Kennedy, who's the detective who's has been assigned a case, and they've got a few potential suspects, and he goes and meets a whore who connects one of her punters with the two alleged murders, connecting that the fact that her regular punter was absent on the 2 days that the two victims were found murdered. So that's a hunch, and it leads the detective Kennedy to a bar to interview the said guy who was a regular for the whore. You following me? We then see the split screen used to show us how the Strangler gains access to these middle-aged women. They're all sort of getting on in age, not young beauties, and he uses the typical sort of method that he's a sort of tradesman, and he's got to get in to inspect some utilities in the building, and he's on a very heavy schedule and he can't come back, but if they're not interested he'll leave, and then they sort of succumb and say, oh well, as you're here you better come in and check, and then they become the latest victim. We're now 3 in, and then we get a police briefing, and all the detectives that have been assigned to catch this crazy nut, as they describe. I give it a list of sex offenders, or potential sex offenders, and they're basically told that they've got to find this guy, and so they've got to sort of shake down these suspects, and if they suspect that they may well potentially be capable of murder, then they're to be brought in. It's all very much hit and miss. They've got no real suspect at all. It looks a case of they're going to check them all out and hope that some shit hits the fan. Sort of police investigations techniques showing how inert they are. The Attorney General, played by Fonda, is sort of cajoled into taking on the overall responsibility. The strangulations have been taking place in a variety of precincts, and it's felt that the investigation should be centralised, and he was appointed to be that. What I found very intriguing with his first interview with the press over a sort of TV relay was his poignant comment that when asked about why these sort of things are happening, he pointed out and made a fine political point that perhaps it had something to do with the fact that the US spent 44% of its tax dollar on killing, reflecting on policing and of course the military, and sort of hits the nail on the head that violence is sort of on order morning, noon and night, and therefore those living in those sort of circumstances begin to, particularly if they have a disturbed mind, to believe that this is sort of very much order of the day. A bit flippant, the script, but quite poignant. I'm still not too happy with this split screen though. It's a sort of technique, but it's being overused. The director makes a point of drawing to the attention of the viewer about some of the absurd connections that are made by various members of the public to point one's finger at an alleged profile that might fit the killer. One in particular where the detectives go to this house and two women highlight the fact that he has two books in his bookcase and that he was actually in the vicinity of the third victim, looking in a shop, and the connections are so sort of absurd. It could actually be hundreds and hundreds of people who may well have bought the Marquis de Sade book, or may well be curiously interested in sort of rituals of a sect or a rare sort of ethnic group who carried out historically various macabre sort of rituals, but to put these two connections together and come up with the fact that it's highly likely that the person that they know could actually be responsible for strangling a string of women is, to say the least, quite absurd. But it reflects on the fact that the police department had absolutely no clues. What is also highlighted is that the huge quantity of referrals to the police by various folk suspecting individuals of potentially being the Strangler. On many occasions, the motivation for contacting the police or telling the police about Mr. So-and-so is based on actual scorn, and this is highlighted in the movie that anybody that doesn't fit, the usual type of stereotype, for example, a gay man who visits shops that are close by any of the victims that have been murdered, immediately can become a red flag if someone who knows the gay man, for some reason has a prejudice, might well contact them as a sort of vengeful act. And this is highlighted again in this particular movie. It's quite interesting how the script is sort of put together, and we've now almost half an hour in, and we've yet to see the lead character, the Salsa, played by Curtis. What's intriguing is, as the film unfolds, we're getting detailed sort of scenes of sort of wild goose chases, sort of distracting sort of suspects, so to speak, which the police are basically wasting time on because they're desperate for some sort of lead, and at the same time the murderer, the Strangler, continues to go about his business on a regular routine time period. Another one chalked up, another one chalked up, and the police clearly are looking for a needle in a haystack, really, with regard to their so-called expertise in tracking down criminals who are involved in sex crimes. The script I find very interesting, really. Well, it keeps your ears pinned, and of course we get a number of anonymous callers wanting to be exhibitionists, so to speak, and also written confessions of various dubious behaviours. It's that adage that we all want to be famous for a few seconds. Warhol said that, and these impersonators wanted to catch the attention of the police. And we have a scene where the part of the team read out the details of these characters who have sent letters to the police station. It throws out a wider sort of interpretation as to what impact a crime of this nature can have, particularly as the media are on top of it all the time, and these sort of lonely, mentally ill folk see it as an opportunity to put themselves in the suspect's frame, even though they are unlikely to be, of course, the perpetrator. Then, of course, we have the psychics who invade the attention of the police. There's one scene where this psychic comes in and he's asked to consider a series of photographs that are laid out on the table, some of which are related to the Strangler's victims and others which are fake. And this guy then touches them, and by an amazing coincidence touches one photograph, which is covered, of course, upside down, and screams that it's a fake. And he then goes on to display how the first victim was found by lying on the floor and posing in an identical way to the victim. But it's hard to believe that police departments might use these people to try and work out a profile and also consolidate their narrowing of what is viewed as a suspect. But it did go on. We're talking about 60 years ago. Not sure where it happened in this case, but it's an amusing viewing. About 45 minutes into the film, approximately halfway through, we finally get to see Curtis playing Del Salzo, the murderer, the strangler, and he's watching TV, and it's at the time when the funeral of John F. Kennedy is on TV in 1963, and he's in a house surrounded by children, so he's a married man with kids. Curtis decides to take a break, goes out for air, he claims. He's driving this sort of Impala type American car. He sees a billboard with an image of a young woman advertising underwear, and it makes him cringe. And then he's about to park his car, and a car behind steals the space. No reaction from him. So we're starting to get a sort of a picture of, you know, what affects him, what makes him angry, what makes him uncomfortable. We've previously seen him displaying normal affection towards his daughter and conversations with his wife. Interesting. Salazar tracks down another apartment, gains access, and he's tying her to each bedpost. She's naked, but then she breaks loose and bites him on his hand. He's previously looked in the mirror and seen his face, and all of a sudden he sort of switches from one meticulously going about his work before strangling to one of a change of heart, maybe, because they've fought back. He then ties a knot round his hand to stem the bleeding, opens the door without leaving any prints, and the woman survives. And this victim proves to be the beginning of his downfall. Curtis is brilliant. You know, he's split personality, to say the least. Having failed with the previous girl, the Salazar is hungry, so he waits for some girl to come out of a lift in an apartment block, sees her enter her room, and then follows her in. Unfortunately, her male partner is there, and then a chase takes place, and eventually he's being pursued by the man, possibly the husband, and his frantic attempts to escape leads to him being knocked down by a car, which was a patrol car, has been called to attention by this man shouting that that man broke into his house, and finally, because he gets knocked down, not too seriously, the police then arrest him. Coincidences. The victim that survived is being cared for at the city hospital at the same time as De La Salazar, in a court of law, is remanded to the hospital for psychiatric evaluation. The victim, witnessed by the detectives, declares after her trauma that she bit the attacker. They're now in a lift, well, Salazar is and the two detectives, and they spot that he's got a bandage on his left arm, left hand. He's protesting to the staff member that he shouldn't be there. The two detectives, Messrs. Fonda and Kennedy, catch each other's eye, and you guess that they're trying to put two and two together. Now, are they going to make 4 or are they going to make 5? The film then plungers into a debate between the police officers and the medics with regard to Albert's mental state. The medics believe that he's got a split personality. The police, headed by Fonda, of course, want to be convinced that he is the Strangler, so that they don't need to continue pursuing an investigation. The sorts of ramifications for his psychiatric state versus the conviction in a court of law that he is the Strangler. This was all rather sort of semantics, really, but this is the movie. It's an adaptation. It's not glued to the actual real events. Yeah, this latter part I find quite dry, where we, as viewers, see two social workers at bay, one who's a police officer played by Fonda, and two, the psychiatrist, and they're both trying to get inside his head, but they have perhaps different motives. Fonda's determined to try and break into the so-called personality that's a Strangler, and the psychiatrist is determined to try and get Albert to share his pain about his self-image through sort of psychoanalysis to an extent. Well, all very well and good, but it rather detracts the fact that, you know, this film wasn't set up to be a film about counselling on the couch. It's set up as a drama about a serial killer. So my contention is, you know, is this part of the movie necessary, or is it going to really drag it out? A poignant scene at the hospital where Albert is with his wife and daughter. It illustrates what a great actor Curtis was, and his ability to switch personalities certainly brings to mind the Three Faces of Eve with Joanna Woodward, and other movies down the road which have, for example, Sean Penn, when he did Dead Man Walking, and although that wasn't really a split personality, it sort of delves into the area of the mind, and that's what is particularly good about this movie.